Hey everybody, I'm Jammer, and today's the day, the video you guys have been waiting for so long now. Come on, clap it up, we're finally here. Today, we are talking about Breath of the Wild versus Super Mario Odyssey. Which game is the better game? Yes, both are wildly different genres and different games, but two of Nintendo's biggest IPs have a mainline title release in the same year. Of course comparisons are going to be made. Both were highly impactful for the future of each respective series. Breath of the Wild dramatically changing the formula, and Mario taking a step back to capture the magic of its predecessors. They both returned to the roots of each of their series to really capture the magic that made it special in the first place. This has been such a hard and difficult video to make, try to formulate out and think, get all my thoughts on paper and get it ready for this script. Because honestly, I have so much to say about both these games. I love them both so much. And again, it's really hard to compare and contrast the two. So I think the best format for what we're going to be doing with this video is first taking a look at each game individually, then talking about their problems on a whole, and then finally recap it in the end with a conclusion talking about which is better. Without further ado, let's go! Starting with Breath of the Wild. Now, first off to say, it's not my #1 favorite Zelda, but it's definitely up there. Kind of thinking back on this, part of the reason might be that many entries in the Zelda series I hold in such high regard, so it's some stiff competition to go up against, as well as partially being nostalgia. Breath of the Wild truly reinvented the open world genre, adding life and compelling gameplay to the tedious task of just traversing a large open world. This is something many open world games struggle with, including previous Zelda titles. The overworld usually ended up feeling very bare and blank, basically just somewhere for you to traverse across from point A to point B, never really offering much compelling within. Sure, there were a few fetch quests and sometimes some rewards for exploration, maybe finding a hidden chest or a cave, but nothing like what Breath of the Wild introduced. Puzzles were naturally integrated into the world, rewarding the player for exploration and satisfying the craving of what is over that next hill. This type of gameplay is something 3D Zeldas had always been lacking, but Breath of the Wild managed to hit it right on the head. The combat system was completely revamped for this game as well. On a larger scale, it's a little controversial, but there's no denying how unique it is. It truly taught the player to not fall in love with a single weapon and have a constantly rotating arsenal. In typical open world games, you'll eventually craft the best weapon you possibly can, so then beyond that there's no other reason to using anything else. This again was another added incentive to the player to continue to explore and collect weapons so they could take on any impending threat. Breath of the Wild also gave players a sense of freedom that really no other game has done before. After completing the tutorial within the Great Plateau, you have the freedom to go anywhere, anytime, in any order. There is absolutely no restrictions to where you're supposed to go. There's a loosely guided path to maybe help you get started, but even upon completing that, it opens the player back up into the freedom of choice. Even within the Great Plateau, which is arguably the most structured part of the entire game, players have the freedom to progress and explore in any order they choose. This is again something previous 3D Zeldas struggled with, where the linearity of the game was integral to the experience. Instead, here players are given a basic toolbox at the beginning of the game, taught how to use it, and then that toolbox throughout the rest of the game is pushed to its very limit for players to experiment with and solve puzzles in a variety of different ways. No two players' experiences would be alike. And heck, if you wanted, you could go straight to the final boss. I mean, granted, don't expect to win, but you can do it. This kind of freedom hasn't been offered to the player really since the original Zelda on NES. And over the years, that kind of experience was something that the series began to lose sight of. But here, Breath of the Wild, that was the goal, to capture that magic of exploration and really thinking outside the box with your creativity to solve puzzles and other objectives throughout the game. Now let's talk about Super Mario Odyssey. Now in this case, I can easily say that this is my favorite 3D Mario of all time, which is contrary to what I said about Breath of the Wild. This could be due to the fact that I don't hold as many 3D Marios in high regard as I do other 3D Zeldas. I've talked about my opinions many times at length, But for me, I grew up with Sunshine and loved it, of course. Upon returning to 64, I did enjoy and respect it for what it was, but I always felt it was lacking a little bit of something. And as far as the Galaxy games, those didn't appeal to me as much. I did respect it for its really awesome soundtrack, and of course platforming design. But it lost a little bit of something when it went to outer space. It kind of ruined that immersive experience as if those were real places. The platforming design got a little too abstract for my taste, and made me feel like I was selecting levels rather than traveling to real places on an adventure with Mario. And that's really where Odyssey took the spotlight for me. In this game, I found the controls to be absolute perfection. It is the best controlled 3D platformer of all time. While Mario 64 was so impressive for its time, the controls have definitely aged. And after going back to other 3D Mario titles from playing Odyssey, there's a bit of clunkiness that I never recognized before. And I think it's because they so finely tuned Odyssey that really makes this game shine above the others. The thing that impressed me the most about this game was the rewards for the mastery of Mario. Now I talked about this in length in its full video, and you can definitely check that out. I'll put a card or a link or a description or whatever. So definitely check that out if you'd like. But basically what I talked about was the intentional dual design for both young and mature gamers. Most platforming or puzzle sections were designed with multiple solutions in mind. In some cases, the natural solution was to use a capture ability in order to reach some sort of objective, but if you really experiment with Mario's moveset, you can sometimes achieve that same objective in an entirely different way, thus making this game cater to two very different audiences, and then bridging the gap between gamers of varying skills. Speaking of which, the capture abilities truly diversify the gameplay, each feeling unique from another. The worlds or kingdom in this game are some of the best in the 3D Mario franchise. Essentially, they are simulated open world with a linear level progression. Each kingdom can vary in size, but they all reward the player for extensive exploration. And this game really incentivizes the optional collectibles through cosmetic rewards. I've never been one to really care about collecting all 100 of certain collectible in a 3D platformer like this before. But something as simple as being able to cash them in for stickers, bobbleheads, or costumes for Mario was enough to have me totally sold and addicted to collecting these things, which again is such clever game design. Finally, like Breath of the Wild, this game gives you a basic toolbox of moves at the beginning of the game, and then that toolbox of moves is pushed to its very limit. The difficulty scales, really pushing the player to experiment as much as possible when playing. A clear way to understand this is after playing a full playthrough of the game, start over, start a new file, and then compare your first half hour to now your new half hour in a new save. Throughout the entirety of the campaign, the player really earns a mastery over the control of Mario, and through that the player is rewarded with this new skill. Now let's move on to some of the problems I had with each of these respective games. Now of course these are in my opinion anyways. So while we keep that in mind, let's talk about Zelda. For me anyways, I found the overall story to be kind of underwhelming. This is a really big challenge for a non-linear game structure like this game is, since a player can be at any point in the world at any time in no particular order. There really was no ideal way to make sure the player was receiving story bits in an actual linear fashion like stories should be told. The solution they had to go with was the memory system, which I guess worked, but it didn't really satisfy my craving for the story that comes to expect with a Zelda title. The other thing I found was that the divine beasts themselves felt a bit repetitive. It was a really unique concept at first, and really twisted my brain to how to solve these puzzles. But by the third and fourth one, I was breezing through these things. This could be partly because throughout the game I was trained to kind of understand and learn how to solve these types of puzzles, or at the same time it could be just because of the comparison of these dungeons or divine beasts to previous titles. My favorite quote-unquote dungeon in Breath of the Wild ended up being Ganon's Castle. So moving forward with this series, I'd love to see them experiment with that kind of formula for dungeons going forward. Then for Mario, the problems that I found with it was that the main campaign felt a little rushed and relatively short. In previous titles, it usually takes quite a long time before you can actually get to the point where you fight the final boss and beat the game. But here, it seemed like the emphasis was a lot more on the post-game exploration and moon collection. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with that, and an easy solution could have really been adding a higher moon threshold before you could move on to the next kingdom. Then another issue brought up with this emphasis is that collecting all of these post-game moons towards the end of a 100% run starts to get rather tedious. And this could potentially be a fundamental problem. The core gameplay loop starts to get boring. Granted, there's nothing forcing you to go for 100%. You should keep playing the game until you're not having fun anymore, then of course stop. I don't know if it's a glaring issue, but it is something worth considering. Because I know for me anyways, this is part of the reason why I don't have 100% in the game. Whew. Okay, we got all that out of the way. Finally, it's time to start talking about which game is better. But before that, we need an intermission. I need a snack or something, because boy, this video has been long. Before I start, again, this is my opinion, and I do encourage you to share yours in the comments below. Everyone's experience is going to be absolutely different with these games. And so that's why it's so important to hear everyone's voice and their stories, because it's an important conversation to have. In the end, remember, I'm not saying one is objectively bad by comparison to the other game. I'm just saying, in my experience and how I personally played the games, which one I ended up enjoying more, as well as I think is a better game. Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey have both received super high critical acclaim. They both have countless perfect score reviews, and there is no question that both these games are amazing. They both pushed tons of Switch sales. Breath of the Wild, of course, being a launch title, and Mario Odyssey being a late fall, almost holiday release. It kind of does make me wonder though, like what would have happened if the roles had been reversed? What if Mario was the launch title and Breath of the Wild had been the mid-fall holiday title? It makes you kind of think that would these games been judged differently? Would this have altered the Switch sales in any way? I really can't say for certain. I'm not even sure what to predict or think what could have happened. It's a weird thing to think about, and I'd love to hear your opinions on it. But anyways, both these games left such a high impact on each of their respective series. Zelda will never be the same again. This new gameplay loop has truly revolutionized the 3D Zelda series, exciting players for what they could do next with this new format. After they finish up the DLC for that game, I truly hope they start development for a Breath of the Wild 2 or something of that fashion. Using the same engine, reusing some assets to pump out a sequel in the next 3 or so years, but really taking all the fundamentals and physics that they introduced in that game and pushing it to its limit. Then on the side of Mario, Odyssey did leave a high impact on the series, but didn't make as much as a drastic change like Zelda did. Not that it needed to anyways. It gave the series a new, clear, successful direction for them to follow. And it's really a similar situation here. I would love to see an Odyssey 2 taking this new capture ability and controls of Mario's moveset and going on yet another adventure with him. I think there's so much to explore in both of these games that just has yet to be tapped. But now, we come down to it. Which is better? Breath of the Wild or Super Mario Odyssey?
Ladies and gentlemen of the internet, we have reached deadlock.
That's it, we've reached deadlock. I'm so sorry, there's no official... I'm just kidding. Breath of the Wild was a mind-blowing experience. Anywhere you could see, you could go. It gave a greater purpose to exploration and simply traveling the overworld like no other game has before it. I hardly even used my horse when playing this game because traveling on foot was rewarding. Going off the beaten path, you'd always run across something to do. And this is something no other open world game has done before it. Because of that, to me, Breath of the Wild really revolutionized this genre. In a way, I kind of struggle to go back to other games of this similar genre because I carry the expectations that Breath of the Wild introduced. Getting new gear, equipment, materials was integral to your survival. And that's the most impressive thing that Breath of the Wild introduced. Mario Odyssey is a masterpiece. I can't discount that. The controls and the reward for the mastery of Mario is the most impressive I've ever seen in a 3D platformer. That dual design for younger and mature gamers is unprecedented. Discounting to surface level, I put well over double the amount of hours into Breath of the Wild than I had in Mario Odyssey. This of course could be due to many different factors, especially because of Breath of the Wild carried that new console high alongside it. But nonetheless, the numbers don't lie. Again, this is just my opinion. They are both two of the best games I have ever played in my entire life. and that's why this video has been so hard to make, and man, it is so long. I did not expect it to be this long. But I think that's everything I have to say. I really want to hear it though. Please share your experience, your opinions in the comments below. My voice should not be the only one to be heard in this video. Which game to you personally was better? Which game left the biggest impact on you, the game's respective series, or just in general? Thank you so much for giving this video a like. It's a great indication to tell me what kind of content you want me to continue to make. What, you haven't liked it yet? Why not? Look how long it is. I put so much work into this. Come on, it's just a click. Please share this video with your friends or whoever. And if you haven't already, definitely subscribe for tons more on Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, and other Nintendo Switch content. And for those of you who made it to the end of the video, I appreciate you guys so much, and definitely look forward to some new stuff coming up. I have a little bit of a cool idea that I'm thinking about implementing in the next week or so. I'll be making an announcement here on this channel, so definitely look forward to that. You might enjoy it, you might not, I don't know. It's gonna be an experimentation, we'll see. Thanks again guys so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. See ya!